Hello, everyone, and welcome to a horribly nerdy podcast, the podcast that's so bad, horrible is in its name. And on this podcast, we talk about comic books, horror movies, horror graphic novels, horror pretty much in general. We also talk about the paranormal, but we're not going to do that this week because we are continuing our Schlockathon Marathon. 80s and 90s, really terrible horror movies that are so bad they're good. Except for last week, we had some really good ones. This week, we've got some really, really bad ones that are so good. We're going to start off with Metamorphosis, the Alien Factor. A virus from outer space transforms a bioresearcher into a bloodthirsty monster. Chief researcher Dr. Villani doesn't want the cops and public to know about this secret experiment. But he becomes lunch very soon. Its first victim, a lonely security guard, whose daughters gradually get worried about him that he hasn't come home in some time, go to the lab to find their father, but what do they find? A dead man and a monster. I was blown away by this movie. This has been on my radar for a while. And I had seen some screenshots of the creatures. They looked pretty cool, but I didn't realize they're actually really good, really well done special effects. The movie itself it's so bad it's good. They use a mixture of stop motion and practical effects, which really was done very well. It was originally entitled to be Deadly Spawn 2: The Metamorphosis, which was intended to be a sequel to The Deadly Spawn, which is a movie that I have a love-hate relationship with. And we'll get into that probably next week or the week after that. I also said that we'll be getting into the Repairman Jack series and the Adversary Cycle series. We're going to hold off on that because I think I'm going to do a whole season dedicated to the Repairman Jack and the Keep and Adversary Cycle series. So that'll probably be coming within the next few weeks. So I do apologize, but I did a lot of thinking on it, and there's so much to talk about there. I said that deserves its own season in itself. So let's continue with the Metamorphosis, the Alien Factor. Not related to the other Metamorphosis film, also from 1990, which was basically about a scientist trying to create an anti-aging serum and tests it out on himself and turns into a horrible creature. That movie, it was literally boring. It was literally scientist, science stuff, drama, last 10 minutes turns into the creature. Why is that a 90-minute movie? That should have been a 15-minute movie. It was terrible. This one actually has the creature right away. You see a ton of it. Maybe a little too much. It starts to kind of wear off the wow factor after a little while. But it still is a pretty cool-looking creature. And they, if you've seen The Deadly Spawn, then you kind of know the characteristics of it. The very sharp teeth and drool and all that. So they did a very good job of keeping that skin tone and the drool and sharp teeth, but it is its own creature. And there are also other monsters that wreak havoc as well, but it main focuses on the scientist turn monster. I was blown away by this film. I wasn't expecting much. What really got me were the special effects, the practical effects. Even the stop motion animation, even though, it's not Ray Harryhausen quality, it's most likely someone in their garage doing it, but still was pretty decent. Got some really cool kills in it. And the ending just blew me away. I knew it was going to be something like that, but of course, what ended up happening was 100% worth it. I found this on YouTube. You can probably find it there as well. I used to have it on my Amazon wish list, but of course Amazon got rid of it, and well, Now, it's really hard to track down, so luckily I was able to find an okay copy on YouTube. I was floored. I was so glad I found it. I'm so glad I watched it. This is definitely going to go into whenever I need a movie that, kind of the background, but will still be enjoyable. This schlocky movie will definitely be in the running. Rating wise, we're going to give it 2.5 mutated scientists out of 5. Up next, I'm going to be talking about a movie that has a lot of love, except for me. It's okay, but I wasn't a huge fan of this movie. I was expecting it to be something completely different, and I was very upset when it was not at all what I thought it was. So kick back, relax, grab yourself a bottle of Viper, and let's dive into Street Trash. When a liquor store owner finds a case of Viper in his cellar, he decides to sell to local hobos for $1 a bottle, unaware of its true properties. The drink causes its consumers to melt very messily. Two homeless lad finds himself up against the effects of the toxic brew, as well as going head-to-head with Bronson, a psychotic Vietnam vet who tends to rule over the junkyard that they live in. And the main focus is on the psychotic Vietnam and his relationship with these two characters and the whole junkyard thing. When I saw the trailer for the very first time years ago, what I remember was a dude drinking a bottle and literally melting into a toilet. Matter of fact, if you look at the poster, that's exactly what you see, is a guy who has melted into a toilet. And I loved that whole premise, and I think that's what the movie should have focused on, but alas, it did not. It kind of went off and did its own thing, and I wasn't happy with it. I was expecting a melty body horror movie, but what we got instead was a weird action movie. Well, not really an action movie. It's not really an action movie at all, but we got a weird... seems like it's supposed to be a psychological thriller, but not... I don't know what you would call this. I guess just a thriller in general about these two young men trying to avoid the psychoticness of this man, and then there's necrophilia involved in one, and apparently there's a woman who works at the junkyard who has fallen for one of the young men, and even though he hasn't showered in 6 years, they end up sleeping together, and I just can't imagine what that smell was like, and it's weird, and I just wasn't a fan. I know this has a lot of love from people. I did enjoy the practical effects when the meltings happened, but unfortunately, I wish that would have been what the focus was on. Unfortunately, it is not. It leads you believing that's what we're going to see, but instead, we get something else. Some behind the scenes. Vic Noto, the man who plays Bronson, was cast a day before principal photography commenced, less than 12 hours. He says, "I didn't know what the hell I was doing, nor did I ever understand who Bronson was. I did scene by scene, not even knowing what the movie was about. I didn't read the script until 3 months after I wrapped. I still don't know what that character was supposed to be." Miriam Zucker was brutally attacked by thugs in a New York City subway station several years before making the film. This attack left her partially deaf and with a large scar on her scalp. The scene where her character is attacked and gang raped by homeless men in the junkyard brought back feelings of fear and dread she felt during the incident, and I feel terrible about that poor young woman had to go through. Any aspiring directors out there who probably will never actually hear this podcast, if you have an actress that went through something traumatic, don't make her relive it. That's fucking horrible, and you are terrible, and you should not do that. The producers were unsuccessful in getting product sponsorship for the film. Shocking. The only company that was interested was the manufacturer of Drake's Cakes, which would send the cast and crew a box of snacks every week. By the end of the 3-month shoot, everyone had eaten enough of the snacks that when it came time to make the scene where the fat bum explodes, the fake stomach was filled with boxes and boxes of Drake's Cakes because they couldn't eat them anymore. Fair enough. I can understand that. Bill Chappell, who plays a cop in the movie, was a real-life NYPD officer before making the film. Future director Bryan Singer was a production assistant on this film. And I'm not going to knock that because I do like when directors are on these weird, crazy films. Like, look at James Gunn starting out in Trauma. Like, that's amazing. I can't say no to that. That's awesome to me. Mike Lackey, who starred in this film as well as doing the makeup, also created the famous penis. No, we're gonna skip that. So future me, edit that out. The garbage. Oh nope. The initial actor who was cast as Bronson was fired on his first day on the set, which is why they ended up with an actor who had no idea what the film was even about. In the original short film, the drink was called Thunderbird, not Tenafly Viper. And I haven't seen the original short film. I've tried to track it down, but I've had trouble. If you've seen it and can point me to it, I'd appreciate it. Maybe it's better than this film. The idea in Street Trash of the drunken and destitute drinking toxic waste is also found in the Nuke Face Papers from Alan Moore's comic book run of Swamp Things, issues 35 and 36. Shot over the course of 13 weeks. This movie really took 13 weeks to make. I don't understand why. And it was allegedly inspired by the 1970 film Doskaden by Akira Kurosawa. Okay. So that is Street Trash. I can't say I enjoyed this film. I wasn't a fan of this film at all, as you've heard me say, so I'm not going to dwell on it for super long, but I know there are people out there that absolutely love this film, and hey, I'm not going to knock it. You love this film, that's great. Tell me why. I'd love to hear your opinion on it. I'm not going to sit and argue with you. I'd love to hear your opinion on it. I will have a civil discussion about this, but I wasn't a fan of this film, and I don't care to ever watch it again. So that is Street Trash. And now, a film I'm actually very happy to talk about. A film that took me a couple views to actually appreciate this film. What are we talking about? We're talking about Body Melt. Residents of a peaceful Pebbles Court, Holmesville are being used unknowingly as test experiments for a new body drug that causes rapid decomposition and painful death. What it's supposed to do is, it's supposed to attack the fat cells and basically decay them, but it attacks the entire body and it melts you into a gooey pile of mush. But it also has weird storylines that aren't really tied into the movie, but they tied in the movie. Then that was because it was originally intended to be an anthology film, but they were unable to secure financing for it. So they literally just took those scenes and kind of re-edited them and reshot them so that way they fit into this film, even though they don't necessarily fit into this film. There is some kind of inbred hillbilly family that has something to do with the pharmaceutical company. I'm not quite sure. I never quite understood that. But these two young men that work for the pharmaceutical company go to the inbred farm to get supplies, I'm guessing. And one of the young ladies gets a little fancy to him, and when they're caught banging, the father freaks out and says, "We keep it in the family." And that was weird. And that's another reason why this film is awesome. Because That makes no sense, and why they kept it in, I have no idea. And people are going to probably be like, you liked Body Melt but hated Street Trash. I like Body Melt because it didn't lie to me about what it was about. It's about a weight loss drug that causes disgusting things to happen to the body. Like, there are these two humongous, ripped, I think they're like German or Swedish bodybuilders who keep taking the drug, and one is literally getting ready to have sex and his penis explodes, which is one of the things this movie is most famous for. That was a very strange scene, and it was a very funny scene to me. There is all kinds of craziness. There's a family that gets invited to this pharmaceutical company under the guise of like a vacation, and they get all the free food they want because it's been laced with the drug, and then they all start having reactions, and the only one that's still alive is the daughter, and it's weird and melty and gooey, and the practical effects are done really well, and that's why I like this film. The practical effects done well. You can, like I've said this probably 100 times before on this podcast, practical effects will always win me over. Unless your story is so stupid that I can't follow it and can't really understand why you misled me in a trailer. Okay, I need to stop talking about Street Trash. I'm getting angry. But anyways, so let's talk about some behind the scenes. Oh, I forgot to give, I knew I'd do that. I forgot to give a rating for Street Trash. I'm going to give it credit for the practical effects, so I'm going to give it 2 bottles of Viper out of 5. This is considered an Ozploitation film, so an Australian exploitation picture, shot and finished, was shot in 1992 and finished in 1993. Lisa McCune and Brett Clamo played husband and wife. Later, in Blue Heelers, they played brother and sister. Awkward. The skateboard sequence was filmed on a rainy day. Now, the very first time I watched this film, the skateboard sequence, the aftermath of that, made me not appreciate this movie. But then when I eventually rewatched it and listened to like an interview or a commentary, and I found out what was actually happening, made more sense, and I was like, okay, now I have an appreciation for what they were doing with that sequence. And it worked well. It actually won me over. It was released on DVD with a new print by Umbrella Entertainment in 2006. The DVD is compatible with all region codes and includes special features as the original theatrical trailer, Umbrella Entertainment trailers, a behind-the-scenes featurette with cast and crew, and a storyboard gallery. It was shot over the course of 30 days, but I don't understand how that is possible when it was shot in 1992 and finished in 1993, unless there was just so many After Effects shots that they had to do that. It has over 400 shots in it. I think I just solved my own answer right there. And on September 25th of 2018, the film was released on DVD and Blu-ray by Vinegar Syndrome, and that's the one that I watched that had the interviews, and I believe it had a director's commentary. Don't quote me on that. It's been a while, but it's been a while since I've watched that Blu-ray. I did end up finding a copy on YouTube, and so I watched it the other weekend. But anyways, Body Melt. Interesting storyline. I do have to admit, like, there is a little bit of, like, apprehension and a little hesitation on calling this a great film. It's really not. And the multiple storylines, when they kind of force it in, okay, I get what you did, but not the greatest. But they at least tried. I enjoyed the film. Thought it was pretty well. Again, the practical effects won me over. And we're going to give Body Melt 3 prescription. Actually, no, we're going to give it 2.5 prescription bottles out of 5. And that is Body Melt. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a horribly nerdy podcast, the podcast that's so bad, horrible is in its name. And this is technically a continuation of last week's podcast because there wasn't a last week's podcast. I did not get it edited in time to upload, so I figured I would just give you kind of a double dose this week. Today, I want to talk about a couple books that I've had the pleasure of reading the last few weeks, days, whatever you want to call it. So one is going to be called Death Tour by David J. Michael. So, looking at the cover, which basically the cover I saw, which was an alligator in a sewer with a person submerged about to be eaten by the alligator, it seems like it's a creature run amok kind of book. But in a surprisingly pleasant surprise, that makes no sense, but I'm going to say it anyways, this actually took quite a turn that I was not expecting, and, usually I'm one of those that, I'm all about the creature feature monster type thing, but the turn it took, I actually quite enjoyed the book. Basically, it sets out that there are these 4 or 5 college students. They run like a college newspaper, and their newspaper is quite known for going into, crazy topics like murderers, child molesters, like strange jungle trips, all kinds of crazy stuff. And they have no idea what to write because they're starting to run out of ideas. Well, the young woman, her father works at the sewage treatment plant, or the wastewater and sewage treatment plant, I should say. He's one of the general managers there, and he comes home one day sporting an injury, and she tells her boyfriend about it, and he decides, well, we definitely have to pursue this story. Well, the manager, her father, claims to have been bitten by an alligator while doing routine maintenance down in the sewer system. And so that's basically what they're trying to do. Is they decide that they have to do an expedition and go down and find these alligators and prove the fact that they're there. And it takes some twists and turns, and it actually ends up being pretty decent. Some likable characters, some characters that just you absolutely hate, but you're actually meant to hate them, and some characters that it's just annoying and pretty much just fodder to be eliminated. But in all, story wasn't bad. I'm going to give it probably 3.5 out of 5 alligators in the sewer. It loses a point because of dog murder, and as we all know, or lose half a point because of dog murder, sorry. As we all know, it has to lose points due to animal murder. Yes, some people are going to yell at me because I don't deduct points for children or infants or adult murders. I don't care. They're fodder for slaughter. I don't care. Animals are a whole different story. And I know I'm probably going to get flack for that, but I really don't care. Because that's what horror is about. It's about terrifying the people. You don't need to rip apart a dog or a cat or a pig or a cow or anything like that to get your point across. Tear apart a child, tear apart an adult. I don't care. That I'll read. Actually, there's currently a book I'm reading right now that had a lot of adults and children that were massacred, and we're going to talk about that pretty soon. Not in this week's episode, but another episode coming up, because it's a continuation of a series I began a few weeks ago, and this one, they're going all out on, and I am really enjoying it. But I digress. Back to Death Tour. It's well written. I quite enjoyed it. It's it not necessarily a slow pace. It actually goes at pretty quick a pace. I believe it was maybe a couple hundred pages. Didn't take that long for me to get through. Probably about a day and a half. So yeah, it was interesting. It kept me going. It kept me wanting to read the story, which normally within usually within the first 30 pages, if I'm just there's nothing here, I'll I'll turn away just because. And I know I should probably wait a little more than 30 pages, but I don't know. If you're not gripping me within that first chunk, then I've got no interest in continuing with the story. But this one, it got me. I have to admit, it got me right away. It was interesting. They had likable characters, and I was all for it. So yeah, that's Death Tour by David J. Michael. 3.5 sewer alligators out of 5. Next up, we're going to be talking about a book by the author that I recently discovered that I'm absolutely falling in love with, and that is Guy N. Smith, who unfortunately passed away in the last few years from COVID. That sucks, because just finding these books and reading them, I wish I had read them long ago, because they are amazing. He does such a great job keeping you hooked, keeping it interesting, and keeping it flowing. It doesn't stop. It flows really, really well. And this is called The Slime Beast by Guy N. Smith. So, a professor, his niece, and an assistant are tracking down the king's treasure in a remote place. While they're coming across with their meteor detector, with their metal detector, they come across this strange metal. And as they are digging it up, there is a hand. But it's not a hand, it's a claw. What is it? It is the slime beast. Where did it come from? What does it want? Who knows? Well, we don't know where it came from, but we know what it wants. It wants blood. It wants meat. It loves to eat intestines and brains. And boy, do we get some graphically detailed explanations. One of them was slurping up intestines like spaghetti. And boy, oh boy, when I read that, I think I cheered out loud, because that was an awesome explanation. This book took me by surprise. It was written in the 70s. Definitely one of those that I jumped right into, had a blast. And again, I have to say, this Guy N. Smith guy, I think he dabbled in eroticism, because there's a couple love stories in his books that are extremely detailed and written really, really well. So I just wonder if maybe that was a sign of the times, possibly, if that was just something that was common in these books. But I'm not sure. If anyone knows about that, let me know, because I am quite interested in finding out about that. So, yes, we have murders, we have intrigue, we have backstabbing, all kinds of crazy twists and turns on the Slime Beast. And it's a pretty solid story, one that was quite enjoyable. Likable characters, detestable characters, and it does lose half a point for dog murder. But this one is also going to get 3.5 Slime Beasts out of 5. If you can track it down, I highly recommend it. There may be a Kindle version out there. I was able to find a version online and was able to skim through it pretty decently. I enjoyed it quite a bit. There was a sequel written in the 2020s. It was in the 2020s, said Tweety Bird. The 2010s. And I can't wait to get my hands on that and see how it really follows the story. If we see the same characters, or if we're just going to jump ahead and be all kinds of craziness. I'm quite looking forward to that. And when I am done reading that, of course, you will get a review of that one. I'm currently reading Slime by... not Slime, Slimer. I forgot it was Slimer by Harry Adam Knight. And no, this unfortunately does not connect to the Ghostbusters film, as fun as that would be. So basically, a group of drug smuggling teens run afoul, and they are lost adrift at sea and end up on this oil rig platform. But yet it is abandoned and desolate. Is there something hiding in the shadows? Well, we'll find out when we review it next week, because I'm in the middle of it. Sorry. But it is actually, so far, it's been really good, really interesting. Definitely more of a sci-fi horror than anything. It's really bonkers. Quite enjoying it. Can't wait to see kind of how it ends. Right now, I'm like kind of at a point where I didn't want to stop reading, but unfortunately, I had to move on to other things. Yes. We're also going to be reading Fungus by Harry Adam Knight. I've heard that is quite. No, I'm sorry. I don't think he wrote Fungus. Nope, I'm an idiot. I just checked that. He did write Fungus. Someone on TikTok, unfortunately, I can't remember their name right now. I'll have to go back and look at it so next week I can kind of give them a plug. They had highly recommended, they said, if you like Harry Adams Slimer, you're really going to enjoy Fungus. They found it the better of the two. So I can't wait to get into that. Kind of similar, crazy sci-fi horror kind of stuff. So I can't wait to get into that. I'm really trying to track down some crazy, and that's what I loved about the 80s, 80s was that horror movement, you had the home to, straight to video home movie horror films that are bonkers and so bad they're good and just insane. And what I loved about the novels was those crazy fucking 80s covers. Just those illustrated covers of the most batshit crazy thing that pulls you in. You see it, you see a strange title, you see a strange, crazy looking cover, and you're like, I have to read this thing. So I'm kind of on an 80s novel horror kick. Trying to track down as many as I can and read through as many as I can because super fun, love them all. Haven't been steered wrong so far. I know we did, I believe it was Night of the Crabs. We did a... Hold on. Okay, yes, so we did review Night of the Crabs. And within the last few weeks, I was able to read Killer Crabs, the sequel. Done very well, brings back some characters from the original. Characters I specifically love, and it adds some more interesting characters. Actually, now that I think about it, I might have given... I think I did give this. I'm sorry, I'm wrong. It's not this one I'm looking for in reality. We're looking for Origin of the Crabs. I forgot, I did Killer Crabs. I did review that. I remember that now. Okay, so scrap that. We're going to go to Origin of the Crabs, which is technically a prequel to all of them, where it kind of tells us how the crabs came to be. Not as great, I have to admit, not as great as the other two. I think because I came to love these characters from the first two and not having them in this one, But I understand it's a prequel. It's supposed to lead into the events. I get that, but I really, really wanted to have our hero come back and everything, but that's okay. It still was a solid book. Takes place on like this strange, private land where this I don't know if he's a magistrate or something. I don't know, he's some rich guy that runs the whole town, and he's a fucking prick. And and of course, he finds out that there are these crabs that are eating townsfolk and eating his tourists because he runs some kind of hunting lodge kind of thing. And not only does he run the town, but he runs the hunting lodge. And two of his clients, tourists, whatever you want to call it, end up missing. And he finds out that it were these giant crabs that killed them. But instead of seeking the authorities or anything, he keeps it secret because he does not want his business tarnished. So the brother of one of the men that went missing comes into town, confronts this magistrate or whatever he is, and he can tell something's up. This guy ain't on the straight level. Something's going on. He's fishy. So we get some kind of battle of wills there. We get battle of the crabs. And we get just an all-out assault. Pretty damn good. Not as many victims, unfortunately. But I tell you what, this one I'm reading right now, the victims really beefed up that body count. I tell you what, I loved it. This one, I still enjoyed it. It was still pretty decent. We're going to give this one 3 Killer Crabs out of 5. Still a very good book by Guy N. Smith. And once again, there is a couple of I'm sorry, my brain is bleh. There are a couple of love scenes that are very detailed and very well written. So I wonder if maybe under a pen name he wrote like erotic novels or something, because damn, he makes some steamy ass love scenes. I gotta give him that. So it's kind of a little break in between the horrors. You get a little horny, not too bad. Horror horny. What do you want? Can't complain. 80s horror. Anyways, so yeah, that is the origin of the Crabs. Loved it. Thought it was done very well, written very well. Again, not as good as the other two, but still an enjoyable prequel of all things. Next, so right now I am reading Rampage of the Crabs, and then we're going to be going to Crab's Moon, Crabs the Human Sacrifice, Killer Crabs the Return, and the Charnel Caves. And then in between that, I believe it's in between Killer Crabs the Return and Charnel Caves, there's a Crab omnibus where he wrote a series of short stories based on these crabs. And I think I actually read one in one of the Dead Bait books. I do recall a Killer Crab story, and I'm wondering if possibly that was his. I'll have to look into it. I'll let you know next week when I look into it. That one I enjoyed quite a bit when I first was reading the Dead Bait series. If you don't know what the Dead Bait series is, it's a series of short horror stories, all having to do with like around the sea creatures and the ocean and all that. Really, really good series of books. I think there might be 2 or 3 nowadays. I can't remember. But I really enjoyed them. Very well done. One of them is done by my mind is blank. So yeah, we'll talk about that next week because my mind just completely took a shit. Yeah. So, but anyways, I do want to give you kind of another update for those that have been following along. Last week was the first week of my new job, and I have been enjoying it. It's been quite interesting, quite fun, not as stressful as I thought it was going to be. And then this week was the second week, a little more stressful because I'm starting to learn a little more, to get involved a little more. But I don't think it's going to be ridiculously impossible. I think that what they're expecting of us is on par with the job. I really am looking forward to delving into all this and starting to go on my own and stuff, and just seeing how things go. But so far so good. I am enjoying the job. Everyone there has been super cool. Been getting along with everybody. I know it's the first couple weeks, but still, it seems like everyone's really chill, really cool, and easy to get along with, which is perfect. Something I've been dying for God knows how long, just to kind of take that stress away. But yeah, so I'm going to wrap up this last week's episode. Like I said, going to be kind of a double week here. Because I have got to do some things, spend some time with the dog, and I just wanted to make sure that I at least did a quick episode and focus on our horror books. We're definitely going to be reading a lot of horror books, a lot of horror comics coming up with the summer season. And I know that makes no sense because fall is usually spooky season, but it's getting nicer out, and I can't wait to just have a nice pile of books to sit out on the patio, relax, and read some books. I'm really looking forward to that, so that's where we're going. And of course, I'm not going to read a fantasy novel. I'm not going to read some textbook. I'm going to read horror, especially 80s schlocky monster horror. You bet your ass. Thank you.
Yeti, giant of the 20th century. Essentially, this was made, I believe this is an Italian. No, it's not Italian, is it? I don't know what this is. Starting over. Yeti, giant of the 20th century is basically a ripoff or a cash-in on the 1976 King Kong remake. Professor Wasserman is asked by industry magnate Morgan Honeycutt to lead an expedition to study the giant Yeti creature found frozen in a large ice block on Newfoundland's coast. The professor does not know that Honeycutt intends to use the prehistoric creature as a trademark of its multinational industrial group. So basically, a young kid finds this Yeti frozen in a huge chunk of ice, and you're thinking, like, you've heard of like Bigfoot and Sasquatch, like 8 feet tall. This must be it. No, this Yeti is like 50 feet tall and huge and gigantic, and just a dude with like a wig and mutton chops and like a hairy body and hair put on there. And and then like it, of course, it melts. It freaks out over cameras flashing. King Kong, we get it. There's a young woman. It bonds with the young woman and the young boy and the dog. And then it runs away. And then they track it down. And then they recapture it. And then they bring it to the mainland. And then they use cameras again and flashes, and it freaks out, and it ends up like being injured, and so they bring it to this warehouse dealy thing, and there's like bad guys all of a sudden, like mobsters who are trying to, I don't even know what. And he had, the Yeti has really bonded with the dog, and the dog goes to rescue the young boy because they're harassing the young boy, and the dog gets stabbed. And of course, the Yeti instantly wakes up, sees that the dog has been stabbed, and goes on a rampage to find the people that hurt the dog and have stolen the boy. And then we get, of course, it gets its revenge, and then you figure, oh, it's going to climb a building and get shot down. Nope. What happens is it kills the two or three evil people, and then the young woman that it has bonded with tells it to run away, go away and be safe, and it disappears into the night. Okay. Happier ending. I get that. Is it good? It's okay. What I find really weird is when it kidnaps, or not kidnaps, but when it first kind of holds the boy and young woman in its hand, she accidentally reaches out and touches like the side of his nipple, and then his nipple gets hard, and then he's horny for the young woman. Okay. Interesting way of like establishing like, oh, he's into women. Wink, wink, King Kong, wink, wink. But the nipple hard is fucking weird, especially since they just didn't film the guy's nipple getting hard. They had to make it a practical effect. Okay. Alright then. And then there's the question of size. He's supposed to be like 20 to 25 feet, but yet is also like 50 feet tall. There are times when like a human comes up to his knee, and then there's times where like he can fit 3 humans in the palm of his hand. And yeah, you're like, what the hell is with the size fluctuation? This is weird. This is, it's obviously just like a hurry up, make this film. It's an Italian ripoff of King Kong 1976, basically. And this was made in 1977, so a year later. So this was obviously just a hurry up, make this film, let's cash in. It's a giant ape-like creature, even though it's just a caveman. I mean, that's basically what it is a giant caveman. It's not even like a Yeti or a Bigfoot. It's really weird. I didn't really understand this movie, but I didn't hate it. I had a good time with it. I was more pissed that they stabbed the dog, but then, of course, at the very end of the film, the dog appears out of nowhere, has blood on it, but it is fine, even though it looked like it was mortally wounded. But hey, at least the dog's okay in the end, so that added a plus to this. So this one gets 2.5 giant Yetis out of 5. This does have, like, if you're really looking for like schlocky trash, then this will definitely tick all your boxes, 100%. Other than that, it doesn't have a ton going for it. I didn't hate this film. I did enjoy this film compared to others that I watched recently, but this one, it was more enjoyable. It wasn't necessarily a slow burn. I think it was like an hour and maybe 20 minutes, but it kind of went fast for me. There wasn't a lot of, well, there is a little bit of filler where like they just kind of linger on some scenes, and it was like, okay, can we move on now? Okay, cool, thanks. Other than that, not terrible, not great, kind of in between, kind of a so bad it's good kind of quality. So yeah, Yeti Giant of the 20th Century. If you have seen that one, let me know what you think. Satanic Panic, made in 2019, starring Rebecca Romaine, Arden Mirren, Haley Griffith, Ruby Modine, and more. So, this one, it's okay. I liked it. I did enjoy it. They had some pretty good gore, really good gore. Some decent practical effects, except for one part involving Jerry O'Connell, which is all I'm going to say. That part kind of was weird. So basically, Haley Griffith plays young Sam, who is on her first day as a pizza delivery driver, and goes to this huge mansion, and she has not made any money today. No one has tipped her at all, and she's pissed. And so when she goes to this super rich neighborhood and she's stiffed for a tip, she gets pissed, finds a way into the house and confronts them. But lo and behold, she ends up in the middle of a satanic ritual where they need a virgin to not necessarily sacrifice, but to end up being impregnated by Baphomet, and Baphomet apparently gives birth to himself, and then he bestows upon them riches, and they stay wealthy, and probably immortality and all that. I was there are, it's kind of a horror comedy. Well, yeah, it is pretty much a horror comedy, but there aren't many super funny moments out of it. There's a few that you're like, oh geez, that's actually pretty funny. What I find interesting about this film is I thought this was going to be one of those where it seems like there is a weak young woman who then by the end of the film turns around and is like a total badass, which, not to say that isn't what this film is, it just took a bit of a twist that I wasn't expecting. That the ending twist kind of came out of nowhere, and even though I did enjoy it, I kind of wish it had, I kind of wish it had gone differently. I think I just went in with a little too high of expectations, and it disappointed me just a little bit. But like I said, it's got some pretty good kills, decent gore, decent effects. I enjoyed it. I would definitely give it. I'm going to give it three delicious pizzas out of 5. Some trivia about this film. Walmart altered the slipcover of the Blu-ray release of the film. They shortened the title to Panic. However, the actual box art underneath retains the actual title, Satanic Panic, because Walmart, they freaked out thinking if they had Satanic on the cover that they would be boycotted and all this stuff. And it's like, oh my god, whatever. Before I get into more trivia, there's something that I do want to say that I find interesting about films like this. Much like the actual Satanic Panic that happened in the late 70s to early 90s, they treat Satanists in this film like every single person in this film is some kind of deranged rapist killer, and it's like, that's not at all what Satanism is about. And much like Satanic Panic, when all that was going down and they were blaming anything they could on satanic activity, it's like, that's not at all what Satanism is about. Satanism is basically atheism, but I'm not going to go too far into that. It's just, I find it interesting that much like the actual occurrence in the late 70s and 80s, where everything was taken out of context, the film's title is kind of taken out of context with the Satanists actually being crazed devil worshippers and murderers and psychos and all this. Now, whether that was intentional from the filmmakers or if it just ended up being that way, I'm not sure. I haven't seen anything on that, but I did find that interesting. Rebecca Romaine and Jerry O'Connell play husband and wife. They were also married in real life. The chant that the coven is using when attempting to hex Judy is actually the charm of making from John Borman's Excalibur. Sam's red Converse shoes are a reference to Dorothy Gale's ruby slippers. All she wants to do is go home. The opening scene is a reference to the opening of John Carpenter's Halloween. The female characters in both are named Judith, which is very interesting. So basically, it's all some kind of POV shot. Someone enters and heads upstairs and walks in on a couple having sex, and the young woman is like, I didn't want to do it, I'm sorry, and she ends up knocked out. And then the young man is running for his life, and we believe he is murdered. We don't really see what happens to him. The young woman who was having sex in the beginning, in that exact scene I just mentioned, is Ruby Modine. There is a 2020 article in the Daily Beast that alleges that when an actor originally scheduled to perform a sex scene with Ruby Modine didn't show up, they just found a random fan of hers to fill in, and she was not comfortable with this at all, but yet they did it anyways. Again, this is what they're alleging. I haven't seen anything else about this. I haven't seen her comment on it. If that's true, that's bullshit. That's not fair. And I really hope it's not true. I just hope it's something they made up for a clickbaity title. But what I find interesting about Ruby Modine is I love her in Happy Death Day and Happy Death Day to You. And she plays a completely different character, and that shocked the shit out of me in this. So in Happy Death Day, she's kind of this super sweet, spunky, even though, well, I'm not going to spoil Happy Death Day, but character and nice and all that. And this film, she's a bit of a rebel. She swears, she fights, she fucks, she does all kinds of shit. And I give her credit, because I just, after seeing her as like this squeaky clean, cute girl in Happy Death Day, seeing her kind of flip her, what I, perceived her to be, I thought it was very cool. It was interesting to see a different side of her. Again, I did enjoy this film. I'm glad I saw it. And, yeah, if you've seen it, let me know what you think. Hello and welcome to a horribly nerdy podcast, the podcast that's so bad, horrible is in its name. And on this podcast, we talk about movies, books, the paranormal, with a kind of a skewed influence on horror. Or who am I talking about? We mainly talk about horror on here because I am a huge horror fan. And today we're going to actually be discussing a series of books I've been reading, and not just a series, a bunch of books I've been reading. I have touched on them previously, but now I kind of want to run through a general synopsis. There will be some spoilers, but that's only because these books are really hard to find unless you want to pay out the butt on Amazon and eBay. But if you don't, and you're just looking to kind of read them, hit me up and I'll do my best to help you track down some copies. So today we're going to be talking about Guy N. Smith's Crab series and what I've read so far. We're going to start with Night of the Crabs, in which a Professor Cliff Davenport, his nephew, and his nephew and nephew's fiance go missing, and so he comes to hunt them down and help track them down, but come to find out they've been run afoul by gigantic crabs. Now, where these gigantic crabs came from, they have no idea. They also know that they have such a hatred and hunger for humanity that if they don't do something, humankind may become, well, the top of the food chain. I absolutely loved this book. It was fantastic. It was graphic. I think I said before, I think Guy N. Smith, he must have wrote erotic novels, and then doing some research today, I did find out under a bunch of different pen names, he had written a bunch of what they call them softcore books, but they're more or less erotic novels. So now it makes sense, because when he writes an erotic love scene or something in these horror books, they're good, they're steamy, they're good, they're incredibly detailed. He does a really good job with that. And if you're interested in erotic novels or anything like that, I'll help you track them down too. I don't really read that much stuff, but if they're as steamy as these scenes are, I might have to read a little bit. Kind of. Well, I'm being pervy. I'm gonna stop. Anyways, Night of the Crabs. They finally figure out, after the crabs have rampaged, destroyed a military base. The army can do nothing to stop them. Their bullets and their missiles and their bombs and all that are just bouncing off the shells. They cannot stop them. So they poison them with something I believe it's called paraquat or something like that. So they poison them, and they seem to have disappeared until a few years later, when we get Killer Crabs, the sequel. So now I believe 4 years has passed. Cliff has married his love interest from the first book, whose name I can't remember right now, and the crabs are back. And this time they go to this strange island. They're trying to find where their breeding ground is, because they're hoping if they can find that, they can stop them. There is this weird side story that really doesn't go anywhere, but it is also interesting at the same time, so I can't really complain about it too much. Of course, just like Night of the Crabs, there's some steamy love scenes, and we find at the very end, they find the breeding ground, and they trap them on the island and burn them alive, and the only one that's left is who they call Queen Crab, the queen of them all, and they let her live because there's nothing more that they can do. That moves on to Origin of the Crabs, which is a prequel to all of them, in which there's this weird, it's really, I don't know, I think I went into more detail on another podcast, so you'll have to excuse me, because I'm just doing this all from memory. There's a lord of this weird estate, and he runs games, hunting games and stuff, and he discovers that the crabs exist, and so two of his patrons end up missing, and one of the brothers of the patrons come looking for him, and all kinds of shenanigans happen, and they discover that there was some kind of nuclear testing going on, they believe, by the Russians, and they think that's what mutated these crabs, and now all of a sudden we have these gigantic crabs running amok. Of course, I've been forgetting to do ratings. Night of the Crabs, I'm going to give 4 out of 5, 4.5 killer crabs out of 5. Killer Crabs, I'm going to give 4 out of 5. Origin of the Crabs, I'm going to give 3.5 out of 5. Only because it just wasn't, it didn't captivate me like the other two novels did. It was still pretty good, but like there aren't many likable characters in this. Like the main character doesn't show up till probably a good quarter of the book is through, and even that, like, he's okay. He's not, like, I'm probably just because I'm used to the other, like, Cliff from the other two books. Like, he's my main character. He's the one I want to see, but man, not much is going on. And spoilers here, he ends up dead anyways because, well, they have to kill all the characters off that have seen the crabs previously because this is a prequel. Otherwise, then they would have been able to warn the world of these crabs. Which then leads to Crabs on the Rampage. And I'm giving this a 5 killer crabs out of 5. Well, actually, I should say a 500,000 killer crabs out of 5. Because this is just a full-on bloodbath. I mean, infants, teenagers, women, children, men. Everyone is a victim of the crabs on the Rampage. Hundreds of thousands of crabs have descended upon humanity. What is making them tick? Well, you could tell that originally Guy Smith was going to end the crab series with this book because we come to find out that the radiation has given these crabs a type of illness, like a cancer. They're all covered in these strange growths, and they're all poisoned, and the reason that they're going on a rampage is they know they're going to die, so they want to get their revenge against humanity. And that's basically what ends up happening. Cliff ends up losing his hand. I was actually surprised that they attacked. You know, they actually had Cliff get some collateral damage in this one. He ends up getting his hand cut off, but he escapes the crabs because luckily it just happens to die just in time before he's fully engulfed and all that. Still enjoyed that book. I mean, for me, for a horror fan, for someone that loves, you know, just amazing graphic kill scenes and stuff like that, this was perfect. Really did a really good job with it. I enjoyed this book quite a bit. So far, probably my favorite of the series. And, you know, like I said, you can tell that Guy Smith, it seems like he was planning for this to be the last crab series. But then after a few years, he gets a little, he misses his crabs. So he writes Crab's Moon, which is actually a prequel to Killer Crabs. In other words, it's actually happening at the same time of Night of the Crabs. It's its own side story, but Night of the Crabs, the events that is happening in Night of the Crabs is referenced in it, so they're happening at the same time. Cliff is involved. He has a couple cameos and a couple scenes. He's got a few mentions in the book, but this is all focused on like a whole side story of this other place that was attacked that's nearby the events of Night of the Crabs. So it was pretty cool. I haven't finished it yet. I'm almost done with it. I have quite enjoyed it. I thought it's done a really good job of bringing back like that nostalgia of the very first book, and I look forward to finding out what happens. After that, we get Crabs the Human Sacrifice, which I don't really know what it's about, but I'm very interested in finding out. Then we have Killer Crabs the Return, which this is after like a good almost 10-15 year hiatus. So Human Sacrifice is in 1988. Killer Crabs the Return is in 2012. So I can't wait to find out what's going to happen there. And then he has a Crabs Omnibus, which I thought when I bought it was actually all these books together. Only come to find out it's actually all the short stories he did in the meantime, in between each story, I guess he did like some short stories involving the crabs. So then it's like collected works. So I will be reading that in between, actually right after Killer Crabs: The Return. And then the last book he wrote was The Charnel Caves in 2019. And then unfortunately, I believe it was late 2019 or 2020, he passed away. And I found out recently he was writing several books at that time. So unfortunately, if any of them was a continuation of the Crab series, I don't know if we're going to get that or not, unless maybe the publishers have someone finish the books for him. I don't know. Kind of sucks because I would have loved to see where this have gone. Kind of in a modern day kind of scenario, but unfortunately, things happen. COVID fucking sucks, and it takes a lot of people out, unfortunately. So please get vaccinated. Yeah. But anyways, I'm blabbering on. I'm also I really like Guy N. Smith's writing. It's fantastic. So I've been trying to hunt down more of his books. I did read The Slime Beast, which is about an alien that comes to Earth and starts attacking people. And that was really enjoyable. I really liked that one. There were some spicy, saucy scenes in there, some good gore. It was just entertaining. And one thing I like about these books is they're not super long. They're probably about maybe 200 pages at the most for a couple of these books. So, they don't take too long to get through, and they keep the pace up. Like, they're not, even though Killer Crabs has this weird side story, it doesn't take away too much of the plot, and you kind of just follow along. And it's not, some people will say oh, it's probably padding for the book. It's not really that. It's just a strange side story that hopefully, well, actually, I think in one of the sequels it's going to, because they kind of hint at it a little bit at the end of Crabs on the Rampage. They hinted at something that happens from that sad side story. So hopefully in the future, maybe in Human Sacrifice or even The Return, we'll kind of see where that side story went. Anyways, I'm blabbing. I'm babbling. What the hell am I trying to say? So yeah, Slime Beast was really good. Oh crap. Oh yeah, Crabs on the Rampage I gave. Crabs Moon so far, I'm not going to give it a rating yet because I haven't finished it. Slime Beast I think I did give it a rating already. I know it lost half a point because of dog murder. I think it was 3.5 Slime Beasts out of 5. Even though, it's got dog murder, it still was pretty good. Very well written, graphically well written. And it was quite enjoyable. And then we're going to be talking about Harry Adam Knight's Slimer. And this book was absolutely fantastic. Basically, a group of young drug smugglers, their yacht blows up, and they end up in this rubber raft, and they find this oil refinery rig that they climb up on, and they hope that someone will be there to rescue them. And when all of a sudden this elevator steel cage thing gets lowered to them, they all climb in, they're dropped off on deck, and then when they climb up to thank the person that saved them, there's no one there. All that's there is just a pile of clothing. But the weird thing about the clothing is it's not just someone threw off their clothes and put them in a pile. No, it's like the underwear's there inside the pants. The jewelry is inside the shirt. It's all very strange. And we come to find out that this rig is not an oil rig, but it is a secret lab in which they've been experimenting genetic mutations. And we come to find out that they have genetically altered this, I don't know if it's a bacteria or something, and they put this gene sequence inside of a shark, and it's been able to absorb people, basically, and it absorbs their personalities and their memories and stuff. And there are 2 different personalities. It has people, and then when it turns into the shark, it wants to tear apart and kill everyone, basically. And of course, the scientists lovingly call it Charlie. It was really, really good. Very, very scientific. There, there's a lot of there's a lot of good action scenes. What I find interesting is I never knew this. There's been a movie I wanted to see for a long time called Proteus, and I never knew that it was actually based upon this book. So, of course, as soon as I found that out, I found it on Amazon, or not Amazon, YouTube actually had it for sale. It was like $5. So I was like, screw it, I'll sink $5 into this, and it was worth $5. It was very enjoyable. There is some interesting details. It does follow the book quite well, surprisingly. The few details that they change were like in the book, Paul is our hero, and he's like the nice guy, and he's the leader, and Alex is just this douchebag raping drug dealer dude. In the movie, Alex is our hero, and Paul is just this douchebag. So they flop roles there. They all basically have the same names. The only real name that they changed, I believe, is in the book her name is Rochelle, and in the movie it's Rachel. Other than that, everyone pretty much has the same name. They're almost pretty much the same kind of characters, except for Paul and Alex. And other than that, it followed the book quite well. And the whole reason behind why they are doing the genetic gene splicing, whatever you want to call it, experiments is different. In the book, it's because this wealthy oil, I don't know how you, like this wealthy oil baron or something, he has just, he's finally feeling guilty for, all the fracking and stuff he's done of the earth, and he's trying to figure out like something nice to give to humanity, and that's why he is like bankrolled this weird genetic experiment thing. And then in the movie, it's just the same guy. I think his name is Lineker or something. Except for he's really old, and he doesn't want to die. So they've been trying to figure out how to keep him alive. Basically, that's why they did this whole experiment. And then, it's really interesting because this thing is able to turn into people. Basically, sometimes the people's personalities can come through and control it, and they try to warn the other, these drug smuggling, I'd say teenagers, but they're really not teenagers. They're like in their 20s to 30s. But it's trying to warn them to get away. But what's really cool is in the movie, the final showdown, like the last 10-15 minutes, you finally see the creature in all its glory. Fantastic practical effects. Like, I was blown away by this movie. I really, really enjoyed it. It was awesome. I give the book 5 out of 5. 5 Charlies out of 5. And I give the movie 4.5 Charlies out of 5. It was done really well. If you can track it down, Proteus, really, really good. I really enjoyed it. The book was really good. That is Harry Adam Knight's Slimer. And another book by Harry Adam Knight I just recently finished is called Fungus. And this is one that was recommended to me from someone on TikTok. This one's really, really good. Basically, oh man, how do I put this? A young woman is trying to cure world hunger, and she is trying to figure out how to create a protein, like a 90% protein enriched mushroom. And so she's experimenting with different things. She figures out some kind of gene sequence that is it rapidly accelerates the growth of the mushrooms. And somehow she accidentally slices her finger, and that gene sequence enters her body. And she, upon physical contact with a few people, has this gene sequence thing. Because fungi is everywhere, it rapidly mutates and grows all different kind of fungus and stuff. And it rapidly grows until finally London is completely taken over. They had to quarantine London off because the fungus it's killed so many people. There are some funguses that keep the host alive, and they become like these weird, not necessarily zombies, because they still have like some kind of general awareness of what they are, but like they're like fungus people basically. But this was really good, very detailed, very unexpected. There were some scenes in here I was not expecting. Again, there are some spicy, saucy written scenes in this book that I came out of nowhere, and there's one that I really was not expecting it to go where it did. That was, it was interesting. And I'm not going to really spoil this one because I thought it was really good. Plus, that one is also, you can track that one down. I believe there's Kindle versions out there and stuff. Really enjoyed it. I've previously read the Harry Adam Knight's Carnosaur, which was eventually turned into a film series. But and I enjoy the film series, but I'm glad I read the book because the book is 1,000,000,000 times better than the film series. Because there's like a lot more involved in the book. So whereas like the film series, we just get like the Tyrannosaurus Rex and the basically they're raptors. So we get a Tyrannosaurus Rex and raptors, and then in Carnosaur we get a whole ton of dinosaurs that they ended up bringing back. And it's really well written. It's really good. I really enjoy Carnosaur. Such a good book. Fungus is gonna get 3.5 mushrooms out of 5. Carnosaur is probably going to get 4.5 dinosaurs out of 5. And I currently just started reading The Wood by Guy N. Smith. This one has got a little weird. It seems so far it's very interesting. It's not as horror as I thought. It's more kind of science fiction, but it might change. I'm not sure. And it seems like it has to do with time travel a bit. I'm not 100% sure. I'm only like probably a quarter way into the book, but so far it has been very, very, very interesting. I have quite enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to seeing where that goes. I've tracked down a bunch of Guy N. Smith's books. He's well known for his horror stuff. Well, he's mostly known for his horror stuff, and that's really what I'm looking for. Like, I don't want to say he's like this part of a splatterpunk kind of revolution, but he writes horror really, really well, and I can't wait to delve into more of it. I can't wait to finish Crab Moon and move on to the next book in the series and all that. And of course, when I finish those, I will be reviewing them on the podcast. And now, as a special little treat, because unfortunately Nightmares of the Deranged isn't happening, even when I was trying to fine-tune it and kind of figure something out, I don't have the time to do it like I thought I would. But I'm going to be doing something along the lines, a special segment of the podcast. So I got a special treat for you to end this supersized episode of a Horribly Nerdy Podcast. I bring you Stephen King's The Lawnmower Man.
In previous years, Harold Parkett had always taken pride in his lawn. He owned a large silver lawn boy and paid the boy down the block $5 per cutting to push it. In those days, Harold Parkett had followed the Boston Red Sox on the radio with a beer in his hand and the knowledge that God was in his heaven and all was right with the world, including his lawn. But last year, in mid-October, fate had played Harold Parkett a nasty trick. While the boy was mowing the grass for the last time of the season, the Kastenmeyer's dog had chased the Smith's cat under the mower. Harold's daughter had thrown up half a quart of cherry Kool-Aid into the lap of her new jumper, and his wife had nightmares for a week afterwards. Although she had arrived after the fact, she had arrived in time to see Harold and the green-faced boy cleaning the blades. Their daughter and Mrs. Smith stood over them, weeping, although Alicia had taken time enough to change her jumper for a pair of blue jeans and one of those disgusting skimpy sweaters. She had a crush on the boy who had mowed the lawn. After a week of listening to his wife moan and gobble in the next bed, Harold decided to get rid of the mower. He didn't really need a mower anyway, he supposed. He had hired a boy this year. Next year he would just hire a boy and a mower, and maybe Carla would stop moaning in her sleep. He might even get laid again. So he took the silver lawn boy down to Phil's Sunoco, and he and Phil dickered over it. Harold came away with a brand new Kelly Blackwall tire and a tank full of high test, and Philip put the silver lawn boy out on one of the pump islands with a hand-lettered "For Sale" sign on it. And this year, Harold just kept putting off the necessary hiring. When he finally got around to calling last year's boy, his mother told him Frank had gone to the state university. Harold shook his head in wonder and went to the refrigerator to get a beer. Time certainly flew, didn't it? My God, yes. He put off hiring a new boy as first May and then June slipped past him, and the Red Sox continued to wallow in fourth place. He sat on the back porch on the weekends and watched glumly as a never-ending progression of young boys he had never seen before popped out to mutter a quick hello before taking his buxom daughter off to the local passion pit. And the grass thrived and grew in a marvelous way. It was a good summer for grass. 3 days of shine followed by one of gentle rain, almost like clockwork. By mid-July, the lawn looked more like a meadow than a suburbanite's backyard, and Jack Kastenmeyer had begun to make all sorts of extremely unfunny jokes, most of which concerned the price of hay and alfalfa. And Don Smith's four-year-old daughter Jenny had taken to hiding in it when there was oatmeal for breakfast and spinach for supper. One day in late July, Harold went out to the patio during the seventh inning stretch and saw a woodchuck sitting perkily on the overgrown back walk. The time had come, he decided. He flicked off the radio, picked up the paper, and turned to the classifieds. And halfway down the part-time column, he found this: lawns mowed, reasonable, 776-2390. Harold called the number expecting a vacuuming housewife who would yell outside for her son. Instead, a briskly professional voice said, "Pastoral Greenie and Outdoor Services. How may we help you?" Cautiously, Harold told the voice how Harold called the number expecting a vacuuming housewife who would yell outside for her son. Instead, a briskly professional voice said, "Pastoral Greenery and Outdoor Services. How we may help you?" Cautiously, Harold told the voice of Pastoral Greenery how they could help him. Had it come to this, then? Were lawn cutters starting their own business and hiring office help? He asked the voice about rates, and the voice quoted him a reasonable figure. Harold hung up with a lingering feeling of unease and went back to the porch. He sat down, turned on the radio, and stared out over his glandular lawn at the Saturday clock. He sat down, turned on the radio, and stared out over his glandular lawn and the Saturday clouds moving slowly across the Saturday sky. Carla and Alicia were at his mother-in-law's, and the house was his. It would be a pleasant surprise for them if the boy who was coming to cut the lawn finished before they got back. He cracked a beer and sighed as Dick Drago was touched for a double and then hit a batter. A little breeze shuffled across the screened-in porch, Crickets hummed softly in the long grass. Harold grunted something unkind about Dick Draco, and then dozed off. He was jarred awake a half hour later by the doorbell. He knocked over his beer, getting up to answer it. A man in grass-stained denim overalls stood on the front stoop, chewing a toothpick. He was fat. The curve of his belly pushed his faded blue overall out to a point where Harold half expected he had swallowed a basketball. Yes? Harold Park asked. Yes? Harold Parkett asked, still half asleep. The man grinned, rolled his toothpick from one corner of his mouth to the other, tugged at the seat of his overalls, and then pushed his green baseball cap up a notch on his forehead. There was a smear of fresh engine oil on the bill of his cap, and there he was, smelling of grass, earth, and oil, grinning at Harold Parkett. Well, Pastoral sent me, buddy, he said jovially, scratching his crotch. You called, right? Right, buddy? He grinned on endlessly. Oh, the lawn. You? Harold stared stupidly. Yep, me. The lawnmower man bellowed fresh laughter into Harold's sleepy, puffy face. Harold stood helplessly aside, and the lawnmower man tromped ahead of him down the hall through the living room and the kitchen and onto the back porch. Now, Harold had placed the man, and everything was all right. He had seen the type before, working for the sanitation department and the highway repair crews out on the turnpike. Always with a spare minute to lean on their shoulders and smoke Lucky Strikes or Camels, looking at you as if they were the salt of the earth, able to hit you up for $5 or sleep with your wife anytime they wanted to. Harold had always been slightly afraid of men like this. They were always tan, dark brown. There were always nets of wrinkles around their eyes, and they always knew what to do. The back lawn's the real chore, he told the man, unconsciously deepening his voice. It's square and there are no obstructions, but it's pretty well grown up. His voice faltered back into its normal register, and he found himself apologizing. I'm afraid to let it go. No sweat, buddy. No strain. Great, the landman. No sweat, buddy. No strain. Great, the lawnmower man grinned at him with 1,000 traveling salesman jokes in his eyes. The taller the better. Healthy soil. That's what you got there, by Cerise. That's what I always say. By Cerise? The lawnmower man cocked his head at the radio. Yazdretsky had struck out. Red Sox fan. I'm a Yankees man myself. He clumped back into the house and down the front hall. Harold watched him bitterly. He sat back down and looked accusingly for a moment at the puddle of beer under the table with the overturned Coors can in the middle of it. He thought of getting the mop out from the kitchen and decided it would keep. No sweat, no strain. He opened his paper to the financial section and cast a judicious eye at the closing stock quotations. As a good Republican, he considered the Wall Street executives behind the column type to be at least minor demigods. By Cerise. And he had wished many times that he could better understand the word, as handed down from the mount not on stone tablets, but in such enigmatic abbreviations as PCT and KDK and 3.28 up 2/3. He had once bought a judicious 3 shares in a company called Midwest Bison Burgers Incorporated that had gone broke in 1968. He had lost his entire $75 investment. Now, he understood bison burgers were quite the coming thing, the wave of the future. He had discussed this often with Sonny, the bartender down at the Goldfish Bowl. Sonny told Harold his trouble was there. He was 5 years ahead of his times, and a sudden racketing roar startled him out of the new doze he had just been slipping into. Harold jumped to his feet, knocking his chair over and staring around wildly. "That's a lawnmower?" Harold Parkett asked the kitchen. "My God, that's a lawnmower?" He rushed through the house and stared out the front door. There was nothing out there but a battered green van with the words Pastoral Greenery Incorporated. The roaring sound was in back now. Harold rushed through his house again, burst out of the back porch, and stood frozen. It was obscene. It was a travesty. The aged red power mower the fat man had brought in his van was running on its own. No one was pushing it. In fact, no one was within 5 feet of it. It was running at a fever pitch, tearing through the unfortunate grass of Harold Parkett's back lawn like an avenging red devil straight from hell. It screamed and bellowed and farted oily blue smoke in a crazed kind of mechanical madness that made Harold feel ill with terror. The overpiped smell of cut grass hung in the air like sour wine. But the lawnmower man was the true obscenity. The lawnmower man had removed his clothes, every stitch. They were folded neatly in the empty bird bath that was at the center of the back lawn. Naked and grass-stained, he was crawling along about 5 feet behind the mower, eating the cut grass. Green juice ran down his chin and dripped onto his pendulous belly, and every time the lawnmower whirled around a corner, he rose and did an odd skipping jump before prostrating himself again. "Stop!" Harold Parkett screamed. "Stop that!" But the lawnmower man took no notice, and his screaming scarlet face never slowed. If anything, it seemed to speed up. Its nickeled steel grill seemed to grin sweatily at Harold as it raved by. Then Harold saw the mole. It must have been hiding in stunned terror just ahead of the mower in the swath of grass, about to be slaughtered. It bolted across the cut band of lawns towards safety under the porch, a panicky brown streak. The lawnmower swerved. Blatting and howling, it rolled over the mower and spat at it. Blatting and howling, it roared over the mole and spat it out in a string of fur and entrails that reminded Harold of the smith's cat. The mole destroyed, the lawnmower rushed back to the main job. The lawnmower man crawled rapidly by, eating grass. Harold stood paralyzed with horror, stocks, bonds, and bison burgers completely forgotten. He could actually see that huge, pendulous belly expanding. The lawnmower man swerved and ate the mole. That was when Harold Parkett leaned out of the screen door and vomited into the zinnias. The world went gray, and suddenly he realized he was fainting. Had fainting. He collapsed backwards onto the porch and closed his eyes. Someone was shaking him. Carla was shaking him. He hadn't done the dishes or emptied the garbage, and Carla was going to be very angry, but that was all right. As long as she was waking him up, taking him out of the horrible dream he had been having, back into the normal world. Nice normal Carla with her Playtex living girdle and her buck teeth, yes, but not Carla's buck teeth. Carla had weak-looking chipmunk buck teeth, but these teeth were hairy. Green hair was growing on these buck teeth. It almost looked like grass. "Oh my God," Harold said. "You fainted, buddy. Right, huh?" The lawnmower man was bending over him, grinning with his hairy teeth. His lips and chin were hairy too. Everything was hairy and green. The yard stank of grass and gas and too sudden silence. Harold bolted up into a sitting position and stared at the dead mower. All the grass had been neatly cut, and there would be no need to rake this job. Harold observed Harold bolted up to a sitting position and stared at the dead mower. All the grass had been neatly cut, and there would be no need to rake this job, Harold observed sickly. If the lawnmower man missed a single cut blade, he couldn't see it. He squinted obliquely at the lawnmower man and winced. He was still naked, still fat, still terrifying. Green trickles ran from the corners of his mouth. "What is this?" Harold begged. The man waved an arm benignly at the lawn. "This? Well, it's a new thing the boss has been trying. It works out real good. Real good, buddy. We're killing two birds with one stone. We keep getting along towards the final stage, and we're making money to support our other operations to boot. See what I mean? Of course, every now and then we run into a customer who doesn't understand. Some people got no respect for efficiency, right? But the boss is always agreeable to a sacrifice. Sort of keeps the wheels greased, if you catch me." Harold said nothing. One word knelled over and over in his mind, and that word was sacrifice. In his mind's eye, he saw the mole spewing out from under the battered red mower. He got up slowly, like a palsied old man. "Of course," he said. He could only come up with a line from one of Alicia's folk rock records. "God bless the grass." The lawnmower slapped one summer apple-colored thigh. "That's pretty good, buddy. In fact, that's damn good. I can see you got the right spirit. Okay if I write that one down when I get back to the office? Might mean a promotion." "Certainly," Harold said, retreating towards the back door and striving to keep his melting smile in place. "You go right ahead and finish. I think I'll take a little nap." "Well, sure, buddy," the lawnmower said, getting ponderously to his feet. Harold noticed the unusually deep slit between the first and second toes, almost as if the feet were cloven. "It hits everybody kind of hard at first," the lawnmower man said. "You'll get used to it." He eyed Harold's portly figure shrewdly. "In fact, you might even want to give it a whirl yourself. The boss has always got an eye out for new talent." "The boss?" Harold repeated faintly. The lawnmower man paused at the bottom of the steps and gazed tolerantly up at Harold Parquet. "Well, say, buddy, I figured you must have guessed. God bless the grass and all." Harold shook his head carefully, and the lawnmower laughed. Pan's the boss!" And he did a half-hop, half-shuffle into the newly cut grass, and the lawnmower screamed into life and began to trundle around the house. "The neighbors," Harold began, but the lawnmower man only waved cheerily and disappeared. Out front, the lawnmower blatted and howled. Harold Parquet refused to look, as if by refusing he could deny the grotesque spectacle that the Kastenmeyers and Smith, wretched Democrats both, were probably drinking in with horrified, but no doubt righteously "I told you so" eyes. Instead of looking, Harold went to the telephone, snatched it up, and dialed police headquarters from emergency decal posted on the phone's handset. "Sergeant Hall," the other end said. Harold stuck a finger in his free ear and said, "My name's Harold Parquet. My address is 1421 East Endicott. I'd like to report..." "What? What would you like to report?" "A man in the process of raping and murdering my lawn, and he works for a fellow named Pan and has cloven feet." "Yes, Mr. Parquet." Inspiration struck. "I'd like to report a case of indecent exposure." "Indecent exposure?" Sergeant Hall repeated. "Yes, there's a man mowing my lawn. He's in the, altogether." "You mean he's naked?" Sergeant Hall asked, politely incredulous. "Naked," Harold agreed, holding tightly to the frayed ends of his sanity. "Nude, unclothed, bare ass on my front lawn. Now, will you get somebody the hell over here?" "That address was 1421 West Endicott," Sergeant Hall asked bemusedly. "East!" Harold yelled. "For God's sakes!" "And you say he's definitely naked? You are able to observe his, genitals and so on?" Harold tried to speak and could only gargle. The sound of the intense lawnmower seemed to be growing louder and louder, droning out everything in the universe. He felt his gorge rise. "Can you speak up, Sergeant Hall?" Can you speak up? Sergeant Hall's buzzed. There's an awfully noisy connection at your end. The front door crashed open. Harold looked around and saw the lawnmower man's mechanized familiar advancing through the door. Behind it came the lawnmower man himself, still quite naked. With something approaching true insanity, Harold saw the man's pubic hair was a rock fertile green. He was twirling his baseball cap one finger. That was a mistake, buddy, the lawnmower man said reproachfully. That was a mistake, buddy, the lawnmower man said reproachfully. Okay. That was a mistake, buddy, the lawnmower man said reproachfully. You should have stuck with God bless the grass. Hello? Hello, Mr. Paquette? The telephone dropped from Harold's nerveless. The telephone dropped from Harold's nerveless fingers as the lawnmower began to advance on him, cutting through the deep nap of Carla's new mohawk rug and spitting out brown hunks of fiber as it came. Harold stared at it with a kind of bird and snake fascination until it reached the coffee table. When the mower shunted it aside, shearing one leg into sawdust and splinters as it did, so he climbed over the When the mower shunted it aside, shearing one leg into sawdust and splinters as it did so, he climbed over the back of his chair and began to retreat towards the kitchen, dragging the chair in front of him. That won't do any good, buddy, the lawnmower man said kindly. Apt to be messy, too. Now, if you was just to show me where you keep your sharpest butcher knife, we could get this sacrifice business out of the way real painless. I think the bird bath will do. And then Harold shoved the chair at the lawnmower, which had been... Harold shoved the chair at the lawnmower, which had been craftily flanking him while the naked man drew his attention, and bolted through the doorway. The lawnmower roared up around the chair, jetting out exhaust, and as Harold smashed open the porch screen door and leaped down the steps, he heard it, smelt it, felt it, right at his heels. The lawnmower man roared off the top step like a skier coming off a jump. Harold sprinted across his newly cut back lawn, but there had been too many beers, too many afternoon naps. He could sense it nearing him, then on his heels. Then he looked over his shoulder and tripped over his own feet. The last thing Harold Paquette saw was the grinning grill of the charging lawnmower, rocking back to reveal its flashing green-stained blades, and above it, the fat face of the lawnmower man shaking his head in good-natured reproof. Hell of a thing, Lieutenant Godwin said. Hell of a thing, Lieutenant Godwin said as the last of the photographs were taken. He nodded to the two men in white, and they trundled their basket across the land. He reported some naked guy on his lawn not 2 hours ago. Is that so? Patrolman Cooley asked. Yeah, one of the neighbors called in too, a guy named Kastenmeyer. He thought it was Paquette himself. Maybe it was, Cooley. Maybe it was. Sir? Crazy with the heat, Lieutenant Godwin said gravely, and tapped his schizo-fucking-phrenia. Crazy with the heat, Lieutenant Godwin said gravely and tapped his head. Schizo-fucking-phrenia. Yes, sir, Cooley said respectfully. Where's the rest of them? One of the white coats asked. The bird bath, Godwin said. He looked profoundly up at the sky. Did you say the bird bath? The white coat asked. Indeed I did, Lieutenant Godwin agreed. Patrolman Cooley looked at the bird bath and suddenly lost most of his tan. Sex maniac, Lieutenant Godwin said. Must have been. Prints? Cooley asked thickly. You might as well ask for footprints, Godwin said. He gestured at the newly cut grass. Patrolman Cooley made a strangled noise in his throat. Lieutenant Goodwin stuffed his hands into his pockets and rocked back on his heels. The world, he said gravely, is full of nuts. Never forget that, Cooley. Schizos. Lab boy says somebody chased Parquet through his own lawn. Lieutenant Godwin stuffed his hands into his pockets and rocked back on his heels. The world, he said gravely, is full of nuts. Never forget that, Cooley. Schizos. Lab boy says somebody chased Parquet through his own living room with a lawnmower. Can you imagine that? No, sir, Cooley said. Goodwin looked out over Harold Parquet's neatly manicured lawn. Like the man said when he saw the black-haired Swede, it surely is a Norse of a different color. Goodwin strolled around the house and Cooley followed him. Behind them, the scent of newly mown grass hung pleasantly in the air. Thank you all for tuning in. I truly appreciate you all. You all mean the world to me. Thank you so much for subscribing, for listening, for staying tuned, and I will see you next week.